Good morning. It's the 26th of February 2022. It's not a bad morning at all. It's a bit overcast, but it's not a bad morning. This is on the Ukrainian crisis, and I don't want to dwell on it forever because it's an evolving situation. I just do feel that, as I say about these videos, I view them so that when I meet people and they want to chat and they want to talk, if there's a complex subject, it just gets tiresome explaining to people what the little bit I have in my head. And so I say to them, look, it's there on a video, have a look at it. And I can put some little bit of research into the video, whereas it's not so easy to do that standing on the street. I'm just giving you my view of it and to try and form opinion, because the one thing about war is the first casualty of war is always the truth. Unfortunately, I believe I have been the victim of a war waged on me by the Irish government, the EU, and the American government, and all of these with their current mad policies that are unassessed. And so that's my view on it. This war didn't start on the 22nd of February. It started a long time ago. Now, they used to say no two democracies ever went to war. No two democracies ever went to war. They say that, and I think there's something to that. And if we look at the parties to this, Russia is definitely not a democracy. No matter what all the commie lefties say online and on Facebook, it's not a democracy. Putin has killed some of his opposition, and the whole point of a democracy is that there can be two candidates or three with different parties, and he has injected ricin and other poisons into them, and they've died horrible deaths. Don't let anyone try to tell you that Russia is a democracy. They have elections, but they work them in such a way that Putin always wins. He's ex-KGB. The USA, I can't say a lot about it being a democracy. There was an election in 2020, and a nod is as good as a wink to a blind horse. In fact, in Arizona, they've already discovered the count wasn't correct. And I can't say any more. They'll ban me if they do, right? Also, I've endured a whole pandemic lockdown thing, which is not legal. And I can tell you that there was one Irishman who took a case in the Dublin court, because for those type of lockdowns under EU law, the government must hold a certain amount of documentation proving that this is justified before they take away our rights. And this man went to the court in Dublin and he demanded to see the documentation, and they admitted they had none. They're now saying the case is mute because they've relaxed the lockdowns. So they also had, as part of their lockdown procedure, that you had to have a mobile phone in order that they could text you and all this, and you had to have it in order to prove that you were vaccinated and all this sort of stuff. And he challenged that. But within a very short time of the court documents being lodged, the whole restrictions were relaxed. That's the fact. That's the fact. And in some states in Canada, they're relaxed. Now, I have to be very careful what I say. Boris Johnson was about to be toppled in England because of his ignoring the COVID regulations, and he relaxed all the lockdowns there. And where are the consequences? Do you see any massive increase in cases? I have to be careful. I'll probably be banned again. If I am, I'll not be seen back here. I'm trying to choose my words very carefully, because this is not about COVID. This is about the war in Ukraine. So I claim neither the USA or Canada or Europe are democratic. I have asked for a long time that they comply with Article 2.3 of the SEA Directive 2001/42 EC, the Aarhus Convention, and the Irish transposing legislation in relation to their energy policy, and they have consistently refused to do it. And when people try to challenge this, to say you're out of time, it's too late to challenge it. So we have to live forever under illegal law that has been brought in totally against EU law. So in 2014, a lot of people talk about a revolution that took place in the Ukraine that had some kind of a colour to it, and some people say that was anti-Russian and all of that. And they're talking now of seizing bank accounts and changing the bank accounts so the Russians can't withdraw money. And don't forget, your man Trudeau has done that in Canada already. He's already intercepted money going to the truckers. So the precedent for that is set. If you go into a credit union or into a bank at the moment and you hand in any more than £2,000, they have to report it for the money laundering. Now that's all right. Nobody wants money laundering and drug trafficking and all that, but that's a bit much. And this is a huge weight on banks and all them credit institutions because they have to process this. Now, the people of the Ukraine do appear to be very woke. They seem to be very much like soft, feminine, LGBTQ, arty. They elected a comedian as a president, and I don't know what he did, but there's 35 million people in it. If you take a quarter of them, that's about 8 million. How come they hadn't all those people armed and ready? How come they hadn't the roads all dug up with diggers, put in £4,000 of gelignite, and a wire from it, so that when the tanks came along they could blow them up? Why hadn't the preparations for this? They had long enough to do it. Putin invaded the Ukraine. But the one factor which I suppose that left it difficult to predict, nobody foresaw who would take over in the White House, the country that would be best to deal with it. Now, so the warning signs were there when they invaded the Crimea. They invaded the Crimea. Surely that was enough. But he mightn't have went any further. The fact is, EU and US voters were not very concerned. You wouldn't win an election. You mightn't be telling them. Trump talked about building up the military and having a strong military. RTE, CNN in Ireland, all the media and all the papers all railed on him and called him a misogynist and all this, and eventually lied about him to have a Russian conspiracy hoax, which was a lie, and they got rid of him one way or the other. Now, the thing about it is that the energy now we see is a disaster because it's actually Russia supplies Europe with energy. How they're going to work that, it'll be up to them. And they still believe their windmills and their solar farms are going to supply them. That's interesting. That could lead to a recession. I don't know. Ireland has data centres. Russians have been spying in their embassy in Dublin for years, and they know about them. These data centres could be hit if there was a war because they are supplying a lot of the intelligence and backup and finance of the world. If let's say the electricity is cut to a data center, they have batteries to carry them on temporarily, and then they have big banks of diesel generators. One of them has Caterpillar generators, big banks of them to take in immediately. You can't, if you let the current go, you lose all the data between the processor and the storage. You don't lose the stored data, but you lose all the data that's in transit and being processed between the two. Of course, if we got hit by some kind of a bomb and hit the middle of the shed, well then that's a different story. You'd lose all then. Now, Ireland is a hub for social media. It has all these Apple and Google and all these, and that tends to make it a bit of a target in my view. It's not neutral in that way, in that all these computer systems are all there and the cryptocurrencies. And there's a principle about never waste a good crisis. I mean, never waste a good crisis. Somebody's going to benefit from this. It's the same as the pandemic. There'll be certain people who will get a lot richer and certain people who will get a lot poorer. Generally speaking, the poor never get richer from any of this. And of course, war is an expensive business. There's even talk of other countries being in Putin's sights. And there are protests in Russia, I mean, about the world. There's no doubt the world is split between the nice, soft, green, woke, LGBTQ and the likes of Putin, who's totally against that. He's the old, like Ireland in the 1950s. Now, I don't agree with either. My point is, I like freedom to be premier, to be top, but I don't like any alternative principle being brought in without the consent of the people. And there's a hardcore of these woke cultural Marxists in America and in Ireland and in Britain and the UK and all this with the New World Order, who are at war with me and at war with ordinary people. All I want from my country is a decent form of government where the basics apply, where we are prudent and wise and protect our environment, and where the law means what it says. That's mostly what I believe freedom is. That's not available in either America, Canada, Ireland or Britain or the European Union. They break the law where it suits them. And it's a terrible job. You couldn't be up to them. I could take 50 judicial reviews on areas where my rights are being trampled on. Now, the Russians did back Trump in the 2016 election. They backed Trump. But they didn't back him because he thought he was a pushover. I think they backed him because he said he'd try and get along, he'd try and do a deal. And I think he was a dealer. And I think he would have worked out an old deal there where the Ukraine would be allowed to prosper and get on, and neither side would take advantage. Let them belt away, let them deal with Russia, let them supply food to Russia, sell and buy, and let them be independent there. Pushing them into NATO, to my notion, was a bit much. I know the people of the Ukraine are entitled to do and have self-determination, but Ireland has a form of self-determination. But we're not members of NATO because that would lose any wee bit of protection we have. I wouldn't be at all surprised if our government at the moment doesn't join some kind of a NATO alliance and all that. But for now anyway, I think if we in Ireland can be some type of neutral militarily, well then I'd fail to see why the Ukraine couldn't be the same. And I think that's what Trump would have worked out. But the New World Order does not want that. The New World Order wants to have control over everything, including military policy. So I think that what the Russians actually saw, what Putin actually saw, when he sat down and worked it out, he saw a President Biden and a President Harris. President Biden, I'd say he easily needs 10 tablets going to bed at night. I'd say that I don't know, is he toilet savvy at the moment? I'd say he can't remember anything you tell him. I'd say he doesn't even have a clue where anything is. He can't decide anything. And while there are people and generals and all that to make decisions for him, it's very difficult if you haven't someone there to finally give the green light to what has to happen. And the consequences of what has to happen is unbelievable. Putin has warned and he's put on alert his nuclear weapons. That's some development in the space of a few weeks. That is some development. He has said he has his nuclear weapons ready, and we can't predict him. We know he wants to be the new czar. He doesn't want to return to communism. He wants to return to Russian imperialism of a form. And he wants a puppet state in Ukraine. And he wants a lot of things. And how the West deals with that, I don't know. I've given you my views on it. I've sympathised for the people of Ukraine. But I repeat again, there are probably 8 million men of fighting age and women in the Ukraine, and women too. Why weren't they ready for this? They voted for a comedian. All that's in their head is this soft policies, and the very same. They crave the same as the American Democratic Party and the Irish woke crowd as well. That seems to be the case. Although I've no doubt there are exceptions, and I've no doubt there are tough people there. But they would have found if they had to continue, and if the Ukraine had been allowed into NATO, they would have a kind of an EU membership thing, and they'd be finding the windmills pushed on top of them, the pylons, and all of this discontent where the government is not led by the people. And they would have found that. Unfortunately, if they are taken over by Russia, what they'll find will be even worse still. This is Hopson's choice. You're down. You're in trouble if you do, and you're in trouble if you don't. For me, there is one maybe silver lining that this forces off the agenda some of the woke stuff. They're going to have to decide what they want. I see Sean Penn demanding that the Americans intervene immediately, and I think that there is that kind of a feeling among people that something would have to be done if they can do it. How they do it, I don't know. There's elections in America for the houses, for the Congress in November. I think that could turn it over to the Republicans and weaken the Democrats. But the Democratic Party in America is a serious left-wing cultural Marxist organization, very, very dangerous organization. George Soros has now called for the West to intervene and to attack the Russians and put them out, and that tells you quite a lot. So there's no substitute for thinking out a thing and figuring it all over, and you'll get an awful lot of material all over. There is no one knows what's going to happen, and there is nobody really knows what is how it's going to play out. It's very, very difficult to know how it will play out. Excuse me. My throat's a bit dry. Very, very difficult how to play out. So I'll let you go with that, folks. I haven't said anything to you, but it's just that we can chat and that this is available so that people can use it and post here under. And thanks for the encouraging post, and get a bit of debate going so that we can find out as much as we can. God help the poor people of the Ukraine. I see people there, a woman who was in a beauty pageant, she's now out with a rifle. If I had my way, they'd be all sharpshooters, they'd all be fully armed. You'd have to have at least 3 rifles in your house. They'd be trained in all military weapons. They'd be prepared for this, and the Russians would walk into a trap. That's what would happen. If I were running it, I'm not running it, and so it has to be all done by the back door. They have to come creeping in now. And as the fellow said, prevention is better than cure. Folks, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I have to go around to turn it off, and I'll see you back for something else. Thank you.